This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Hello and welcome to the October 17th meeting of the Easthampton Economic Development and Industrial Commission. Let's see. First things first. We are missing Mo Beliveau. Cassie, are you willing to take some minutes today?
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Getting organized here.
Yeah, ideal. Have folks had a chance to review the September meeting minutes?
Looks good.
Okay. I did have some notes from Jeff Bagg in response to the minutes. And they are, he can't be here today. They lost one of their, well, I guess their assistant planner. And they've been without him for about 6 months, and he's struggling in the planning department with just him and Jamie. So he says he's not sure it's worth changing, but he doesn't think the number of units at Ferry Street is expanding exponentially, given that exponential suggests unlimited forever growth.
Okay.
That said, my response was, well, there's a connotation of large, and increasing the number of units by 50% is significant, going from 150 to 225. We can decide whether we want to change that in the minutes or not, I suppose.
I'll change it. I'll just change it.
And he said he did not think that while he did write an email with some caution, it was not as direct as Jeff cautioned that impediments to development not be put in place. And I mean, what he did say was, we don't want to make it extremely difficult for people to make proposals for developments. And here are the smart growth zone design standards that we haven't used yet. So I don't know. If you have thoughts about that, we can change the minutes or we can leave them as is. Any thoughts?
I could change it to we don't want to, and I'll wordsmith it later, but, put up needless barriers or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Unnecessary barriers.
Or additional barriers. Additional barriers.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. All right. So any other discussion of the September minutes? So
Sean, just for the record,
Mhm.
Do you want to give your last name to be recorded in the minutes?
Community member Sean, would you like to be recorded with your last name in the minutes?
Yes, sorry, Sean Abbott. And every time I start one of these Google Meets, it's not my work one. I have to adjust my microphone. So sorry.
Oh, understood. Sean Abbott. Thanks for coming, Sean.
2 B's and 2 T's.
That's correct, then.
Got it.
Very good. Okay, so if we make those tweaks to the September minutes, shall we consider moving to approve those?
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes with those changes.
I'll second.
Okay, Chris seconds. All in favor, holler aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Unanimously approved. Outstanding stuff. Now, what else are we talking about today? Oh, we have a moment for public speak. So if there's anything that is not on the agenda that members of the committee would like to share, or if Sean, there's something you'd like to discuss, we welcome your contributions now.
Nope, just fly on the wall.
Great. Nobody else?
Gwen,
Yeah.
I was just going to mention it, 'cause I'm not sure it's on the agenda, but it looks like the hot tub place is finally moving ahead.
Indeed, I saw that. They have big plans. Wow, wow, wow.
And there's an interesting thread on the Easthampton page this afternoon. Someone was taking an informal poll about pros and cons. What have they seen better or worse for traffic on Northampton Street since Starbucks opened? And virtually everyone said, no change, no difference. Everything's been the same. And if you looked in the article about the hot tub place, they chose Northampton Street because of the traffic.
Yeah.
They need high visibility.
Yep. True enough. There wasn't mention in that article about, I mean, why would there be, but about their energy needs, was there? I was looking for it and I didn't see it. So they must have figured out something, or they were like, all right, I guess we go propane. I don't know.
Yeah, did not see it there.
Or they've changed the number of hot tubs, because it looked like they were really getting into a more diverse selection of services than they might have had at Easthampton when they were in Northampton too. I can't remember. Anyway, it's great news. I'm delighted that they're moving forward. Thanks for bringing that up, Tom. Okay. Next topic. Folks, I am going to be working through a 1-year intensive training experience this coming year, calendar year 2024, with local business owner Nicole Caparoso Kutcher, who is related a little bit to David Kutcher. So because that is going to be a pretty time-intensive way of spending my days, weeks, months, I would like to solicit someone's to support/play the role of chair for January to November minimum. That would be really valuable to me. I was thinking about it as I got my letter from the city saying, your term is up in December. If you want to continue, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, I think I want to continue. I think this is going fine. And I'm in a position now for the first year of that next 3-year term to be more difficult for me than usual. So any thoughts about how we could manage that as a group? Recognizing that we have 6 people right now, we do still want more people. Whatever we can do to get more people would be ideal. It will make things a little easier for everyone, but I'm thoughtful about leadership. David.
So I'm unable to, unfortunately. But I also got to notice that my term is up as well. So
yeah, that happens when you step into an existing one.
So I will be happy to support whoever does do it, but I think Chris is dropping off at the end of this year. So that unfortunately only leaves Cassie and Tom.
And Mo. Okay.
And Mo.
Well, we can't ask Mo, can we?
That seems unlikely. I mean, we can. She's a member of the committee. She can be the chair. I don't think it really matters. But, she's not here to say whether or not she'd be interested in that. 5 is a small number, given that our anticipated complement is 9.
Yeah, you would need 100% attendance for a quorum.
Every single time.
Every single time.
Yeah, no one could ever be absent. So we really do need to work on membership. I don't really know how to do that. I've been thinking about it. I had some conversations with a couple of people. I haven't heard from Anita. I could get back in touch with her and see if that is moving forward. But a number of people that I've spoken to have said, I just can't swing what is basically still the work day for a traditional work world. So I don't know what to do with that.
My issue, Gwen, so Gwen, you wouldn't be able to attend meetings, or you will?
No, I can come to meetings. I'm just looking for a little support outside of them to like make things cohere and pull together agendas and run meetings and make plans for what's coming down the road and stuff, and like communicate with other committees and that.
Yeah, my issue is the technology and the skill set required with remote meetings. I mean, when meetings were in person, that was great. I might have been chair for 10 years, for all I remember, and then, why can't I remember his name, took over from me.
Josh
Took over from me.
Yeah.
Might have been more than 10 years that I was chair, but those were in-person meetings, pretty simple, slap an agenda together and everybody get in one room and call it a day. I love the remote meetings, but I don't know that I have the technology to do that.
I'll tell you what, you're sitting here on this meeting and you are the VP of Easthampton Savings Bank. I believe you have the skills. It will
No.
take me 15 minutes to teach you.
I had people back in the
Well,
day. I might have been.
The good thing is that the link to these meetings never changes. It's always this link.
Yep.
And so you can just reuse the same agenda over and over and just write new stuff at the bottom about what we're actually going to talk about. And everything else is just, here's the symbol you click on to record the meeting. That's basically it.
I think we can give it a shot. I mean, I just took on another role yesterday from another committee, but
Oh, good. You're filling your retirement. That's valuable.
yeah. I said if I stayed at work, at least I would have gotten paid for it. But yeah, well, let's give it a shot in January and see what happens.
Okay. I'm happy to sit down with you and talk through it. It will be, I believe in you as a quick study.
Maybe we could suspend meetings for a year.
Hey. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I think we grew to 9 under, actually, I can't, I'm blanking on his name. Our last chair.
David.
John.
No, it wasn't Josh. It was,
David.
Was it David?
Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah, Boyle. David Boyle.
Boyle, that's right. Did we grow from 7? Was that what we were?
No, we shrunk.
Yeah, we shrank from 10.
Ah, okay. Because I was saying we could probably shrink again. I don't know what the process to do that's like, though.
It's true. Yeah, we could. It requires, there's something that would have to go through city council itself, because there's a piece of paper that says that they voted on shrinking us from 10 to 9 at some point in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think we leave it at 9, Chris, and give it a shot. I hate to lower it. I hate to chase this downhill, so to speak. You know, what do we do eventually? Lower it to 5 and then 3. I think we keep it at 9. We keep our fingers crossed we get a quorum at every meeting, and try to fill out some other seats. By the way, I think I remember Gwen saying, Chris, that you couldn't leave until you found a replacement. So welcome aboard again.
Mm-hmm. Work on that, Korchik.
It would be great if people really did reach out to other people. I know I dragged Dave into it because he lives close to me, but you know, just ask somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Sean Abbott would be an ideal contributor to our.
Yes.
I'm have literally no experience. I could contribute, but I'll let you know after I see how the bees committee goes, because I am going to be on bees.
Well, great. Let's talk about it. We are, so Sean, we don't mean to give off the air of expertise that evidently we're giving off, but few of us on this committee have any background specifically in economic development, commissioning industry, etc. We are a group of Easthampton cheerleaders, I would say, and we look good without the pom-poms. So that is.
I will certainly consider it, but I would like to see how much time bees, which I've already committed to, eats up. So
totally. Well, I bet somewhere I have your email address, Sean, don't I, from a previous meeting?
You do, although perhaps, and you actually might be getting an email from my partner soon, because she is the municipal advocate for Mass Bike and has been requested to talk to the Massachusetts Development and Industrial Council, and wanted to talk to somebody who was more local first, so she had more of a sense of things. So anyway.
All right, very good. Okay. Yeah, for real. Korchik, talk to your friends, talk to your enemies. I don't care who you talk to. We want people. Kutcher, you too. Tom Brown. I feel like you probably exhausted all the people you know, but maybe that's not true.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. Thank you for stepping up to that, Tom Brown. Again, I will just summarize that whole thing with, I believe in you. You and computers can have a great relationship.
Like I said, I had people.
Yeah, well, the rest of this group can be your people. We can
Great,
give you
thanks.
guidance.
I had people that made me look good, so you guys have to make me look good.
Okay, we'll work on it. Bring your pom-poms.
Yeah.
All right, so the rest of our conversation is about, it's following up on our last meetings. But, you know, we've been going around for a while about what are we focused on? What do we want to pursue? And last time we had a conversation about the expansion of the Ferry Street, the next round of the residential buildings, which will be going to 225 housing units. Hooray, hooray. But which will have concomitant large increases in parking requirements presumably based on zoning that is not tied to the new smart growth design standards, even though the smart growth zone applies to the Ferry Street area. So I put a bunch of resources at the bottom of the agenda that I sent you, and I read through almost all of them last night, so I could say I did the homework. And Cassie's done a bunch of reading and thinking outside of this, as has David. And we started talking about the idea of local incentives for green energy elements built into new developments or renovations, et cetera. And started looking at the idea of like a solar canopy over parking lots or similar. Thinking about when I went through the documents in the agenda, in our RFP for the consultant who's now in the process of developing our climate action plan, you can then link to our green infrastructure master plan for the city. You can link to the smart growth zone design standards, et cetera. And there are references in both of those things to how important it is to manage stormwater, to improve water quality in the area. The Ferry Street buildings are literally on and over water. They abut it. It's a big deal that you've got a lot of blacktop right there. And it also says I wrote this down, in our design standards that we want to encourage renewable energy technologies. We want to encourage walkable, pedestrian-friendly spaces. You know, what was it? Avoid parking layouts that dominate a development. That's a quote. It's vague, but it's a start. And it literally lists solar canopies over parking lots as something we want to pursue. So it's totally true. We like what's going on at River Valley Co-op. Why not incentivize that in other places? What are some ways that we can encourage that kind of development instead of just saying, all right, so we've got all these parking lots, and then over here we have what used to be agricultural fields covered in solar panels. Why could we not make those two things do the same thing simultaneously? So I'm going to stop talking. David has something to say, and then maybe we'll go down a useful tangent. David.
Oh no, you were perfectly going down the right tangent. I had an interesting conversation with Owen, our city councilor, but he was telling me about how the struggle that the co-op had in order to have a commercial canopy, and the struggles of them getting hooked up both locally as well as state hookup and Eversource and everything. Basically, it was a 800-pound gorilla that they were trying to lift to make it work. But he would like to see, trying to figure out ways to reduce that burden to make it so that those approvals can go through and happen much more quickly. An interesting conversation that I was in earlier on Facebook, of all places, was, and something I haven't really thought about, frankly, and I will completely fess up to that, but that rental units and the rental spaces in our city don't have any way for someone with an electric car to charge their car. So that the burden of switching to an electric car is basically impossible for someone that does not own their own home. Because of that, we have no way of incentivizing any of the rental developments in our town into putting in solar or even solar hookups. So just something to consider of, if we are to do this in a sustainable way, and in the documents you sent, they quite literally say encourage sustainable energy sources, but that's it. That's the extent of the encouragement. Is saying like, yay, go solar. We really need to reduce that burden so that it's not a tiered benefit to the people that can afford it, but that it's actually something that helps our entire community and makes it available to our entire community. And while new development is definitely, a way to go in encouraging new development to go in, I think in finding ways to encourage existing developments to make those upgrades is something that we really should focus in trying to find the right carrot stick balance.
It's really interesting. Thanks for bringing that equity point to us. Tom?
Yeah, I think one of the points or one of the questions I had when we first discussed this was whether or not we could come up with a program, we meaning the city, could come up with a program of tax incentives, which, for example, One Ferry Street or the Ferry Street project received some pretty significant tax incentives from the city, which basically defers your taxes for some period of time. And then assuming you're ramping up your revenues to be able to pay your full boat someday, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, excuse me, you get to a full tax burden. So, the question would be, is there a way to say, and I don't mean it to be dollar for dollar so it doesn't cost you anything, but is there some sort of tax incentive that could diminish the cost of the solar installation?
Yeah. Cassie, you've got stuff to say about this.
I do have stuff to say about this. I went to the Energy Advisory Committee yesterday, and that is one forceful committee. They're great. And new construction, and I'm just going to do a dump of everything I've been doing. Northampton has put in zoning law changes such that when you build a building, you have to wire it for future electrification. So even if you put in a gas furnace, you need to put the lines in so that it's, future friendly, because that's the way the world's going. I thought that was really interesting. They've really got eyes on all kinds of initiatives, grants, everything that's going on around the world. And they're coming out with their climate action plan. And you said September, Gwen?
I think it's the final per the original RFP is due December of 2024, but you said there's a draft coming in February? Draft
coming out in February. Cassie Traegert's coordinating that. Then I also went to the Energy Advisory Committee kind of stakeholder input session. So there were a lot of people there. I was really impressed. Their first meeting had about 15. There were about 50 people at this meeting. And so we learned from their presentation that structures represent the largest carbon emitter in Easthampton. So homes and businesses. And then they put us through an exercise in which we knew of the cost of a certain intervention and then its impact. So, you get the 5 stars for solar as terms of expense, but it's also the biggest bang for the buck. Then, it went out of my mind. I reserve the right to, what is it? I give my time. What is it? I've been watching the Jordan stupidity today. Anyway, rentals. Something about
Well, we were
rentals.
talking about the idea of local tax incentives.
Yeah. Well, then, Gwen, maybe you want to show that database I sent you.
Sure, yeah. I will
I
put
haven't.
the link in the chat so everybody can see it
Oh,
and
great.
share that as well.
This is a huge database nationally of different kinds of incentives for putting in green energy. Lots of rebates, regulations, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And
these are at the state level, is that correct?
yeah, these are state level initiatives.
Yeah.
So I haven't been through it all the way yet. But I'm going to go looking in there for tax incentives.
Yeah, they certainly give us an idea of what is available at the state level. And you've mentioned that Northampton is moving forward with a specific way of thinking about what they are, as you said, a green city. And you were wondering earlier if that's a designation that we share.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest.
Right. Okay, David. You're on mute, sir.
Apologies. My middle brother lives down in Baltimore, and I think about 8 years ago, he bought at auction through the city of Baltimore two townhomes side by side that were in one of the scenes from The Wire. So you can imagine the state of the condos. I think townhome one had a tree growing up through the middle of it and had no roof. The other had no windows, no doors, et cetera, et cetera. But he bought the two of them combined for $15,000, and they came with some ridiculous amount of property tax offsets to be used over the course of 5 or 10 years in order to encourage people to buy these burned out homes and renovate them to not gentrify so much as reclaim entire blocks in the city of Baltimore, North Baltimore. And those blocks now are fully inhabited and completely renovated. So it's now that the city is recouping the value of what they gave in terms of getting those properties off their books, but also they got the private people to invest for a fraction of the cost. And I think that that's what we have to really look at. I come back to the carrot and stick, but I think that's what we have to look at in order to get to where we want this town to get to. While the incentives are there, like another person in the conversation that I was referring to earlier basically said, 30% rebate's great, but if I have no money to put up front, I can't take advantage of any of it. And it's completely correct. Like, you can't even put in a charging station, which costs about $1,500, even though Eversource will pay you back half of it. Well, if you don't have the $1,500 to put up front, what's the point?
Right.
And I think those are those barriers to entry that we could take a stand for as a city development purpose. And yes, it comes into the planning part of it, but really it is an economy part. Like, it is an economic impact from top to bottom, because if you are providing a way for every consumer and every resident to take advantage of this, to put their money elsewhere into the plan and be able to not just be throwing money away, but also saving the environment at the same time, those are the things I think we need to encourage from a development standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Tom?
Yeah, I may be oversimplifying this, but it seems like it would be pretty easy for the city to forego some tax dollars that they never had. So if you look at the Ferry Street project, what were the owners of that paying for taxes when it was the way it was for all those years? Probably not a lot. So if you say, we're going to increase your taxes to the new value only by 50% for the first 5 years, well, that 50% increase is still pennies from heaven. And when it goes to 100% after 5 years or whatever number of years, it's multi tens of thousands of dollars from heaven. So it's easier than taking an existing property and saying, excuse me, we'll give you a tax incentive, because that's money the city's already counting on. So if they're going to give a tax incentive on my home, for example, I'm already paying $5,000 a year. It's going to start to hurt the city if they gave me some sort of tax incentive. But on new construction, it should be pretty simple, because it's money they never had. Hope that made some sense.
Yeah, true enough. I'm thoughtful about this idea about existing rental spaces really not having any incentives or means currently to make it possible for tenants to invest in what electric vehicles or appliances they might otherwise want to invest in. So it's an excellent insight. And I'm curious about what comes out of that. Where do we head with something like that, David?
Well, along those lines, I mean, we have plenty of municipally owned parking lots. Why aren't they covered? I mean, why doesn't 50 Payson have a covered parking lot? You know, why the overflow parking lot at the middle school and the high school, you know, during off hours, why aren't they, you know, why are there only, I don't know, a handful of outlets at the high school and middle school? You know, how can we use those resources that are already available to the city to generate power and make it equitable at the same time? You know, like, yeah, it doesn't solve the problem of getting private rental developments to put in solar or charging stations, but at the same time, it uses the resources that we have available to us to lower or to increase that equity position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chris.
I think, and Tom might be able to speak to this, I think that when there's some law on the books that said that we can't generate more power than the city uses. You know, the city buildings, not the city. But now that we have a municipal light plant, we might be able to get around that if we were to use the light plant to generate and sell power back to the city. That's something I had been thinking about when we passed the light plant, but time.
Interesting. Okay. So that would be, I mean, that's a conversation to have with that crew. Is that wrapped up in energy advisory at this point, or no? Are they still a separate?
I've only been to one meeting.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. I'm asking Chris.
I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
Municipal light plant. I think that there has to be a committee has been appointed to run it, but since we passed it with the express, not legal purpose of doing the municipal fiber.
Yeah.
That's what the focus has been, but we can do power stuff with it too. I don't think anyone has really picked up the reins on that.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Tom?
You can do an awful lot of stuff with the MLP.
Okay. Cool. Tom, what do you got? You're muted, sir. Unmute yourself, guy.
Sorry. Chris is correct in that years ago, the city entered into some sort of long-term contract with some solar generating field in South Deerfield, I believe is where it was. And we actually couldn't put all the solar that we wanted to on top of Mountain View School because we couldn't generate more than what the city could use. And we were hamstrung by that contract of what we were buying from out of town. I don't know when that contract is up, And if the city could systematically look at replacing what we use from that contract with its own solar. But that was done, I believe, in a previous administration, which wasn't a bad deal at the time, I believe. But we are stuck with that long-term contract currently.
Interesting. Good intel. David, what do you got?
So then why not use that to our advantage and make all the power at 50 Payson, every parking spot free power, and just overload it. So that, because it's technically owned by 50 Payson, and then the city's using more power, just giving it away for free.
Yeah. I don't. Somebody smarter than I would have to figure that out.
Just work around it. I mean, imagine the idea that Easthampton is always giving away free power for charging your cars. Like,
that's pretty.
And then while you're charging your car, you have to kill an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So you walk up and down Cottage Street.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry.
It doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world.
No, it doesn't. Sean, would you like to weigh in?
Yes, ma'am. So around the charging stations, at least the ones that are done through ChargePoint, there is apparently some sort of issue already happening where the city was trying to pay for it, but they were under some level of how much power they were giving away. So it was actually costing the city more than it otherwise would have. So I do think that figuring out a way to just directly charge it is a great idea. And I think the municipal light plant is probably the way to do a lot of this stuff. A question I had was sort of so another thing that I think if you wanted to do that sort of power for everybody, storage is going to be an issue, and there are a lot of good storage options coming online, but most of them are new, and newer things tend to be more expensive. So that is, and then you also have to figure out where to put, whether they be redox flow batteries or there's a carbon dioxide battery. There's some really cool stuff out there. But and then one other question I do have, though, that I kind of would love the idea of is, if you could go through the municipal light plant, could you then have your incentive be that anybody who installs solar is then selling the solar to Easthampton, not to some third party? Especially if you could figure out storage, that might give you enough leverage to kind of figure out, because then the Easthampton Municipal Light Plant becomes, Easthampton owned solar plus Easthampton business provided solar. And that seems like an equation that gives you more leverage, and that would be really interesting.
For real. We're doing like a multidisciplinary science project now. All right, David Kutcher.
So I think I sent it to you, Gwen, a little bit late, but there was a breakdown of the electricity sources of New England provided by whatever that group is. I can never remember the name of it. But basically, I believe our mixture right now is only 20% renewables in that form, but that was from 2021. So even if all the solar that we generate, rather than going to on-site storage facilities and batteries, simply goes back into the grid, and we just get that money back, which is basically how solar works these days for the most part, unless you have a battery, it still accomplishes the same thing, which is it reduces that load and becomes part of the mix that just comes back to you. So there might be a minimal cost in that you're generating during the day and then using it, during other production times. But at the same time, I don't think worrying about the on-site storage is is a huge hurdle. I think it's more going to be, how do we simply get people to put solar up? Like I said, even if we skip the local storage and just put it back into the grid, we're still way ahead.
Okay. We are reaching levels of policy and practice thinking that exceed my skill set. So, we have 20 minutes left in this conversation, approximately. That's what my computer says. I don't know what anybody else's says. Any thoughts on what the next step is from here? What is the next most generative step for us to talk about? I am imagining that we want to come to a November conversation having collected more information, but I am genuinely not certain what the next steps are. Sean, what do you got?
Would it be worth bringing in somebody from River Valley Co-op to find out what their challenges were? Because I understand that like there was also potentially some like interconnect issues with them getting online. Figure out if there was any regulatory hurdles that they felt they had, just so that like, you know, it's somebody doing exactly what was proposed here. So if like finding out exactly what their pain points were seems maybe worthwhile.
I'm gonna try to encourage Owen to come to our next meeting, because I know he was trying to push a city ordinance a while back, but he also spoke at length with the co-op and got their feedback as well about what the hurdles were. But I know he really would like to see something along those lines as well. And if maybe working towards some piece of ordinance or legislation, local legislation is the way to go, then I think he would be the one to speak to about next steps.
Okay, Cassie? And then I'll
the one thing I heard at the meeting, which is what I forgot to mention, is that when you do a side-by-side of go on in and put in, you know, regular fossil fuel heat or put in solar or electrification, the costs actually come out to be about the same with all the incentives that are available. And so I was wondering, it seemed then that developers needed education if they're not aware of all this stuff that's out there. I didn't know if we wanted to create resource materials for them.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm okay. These are good, but people are touching on our earlier talking points, which I value. Thank you for doing that. Developers need it.
The theme across all the energy meetings that I've been to is that it's complicated, it's hard to understand, and people want to be led through the process.
Huh. Okay. And we do not have a sense that there is some entity out there trying to create such educational materials.
I don't know of any, but that doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
We could
Okay.
find out.
Yeah, we could find out.
I think we need to get a good link with the energy group.
I agree with that.
If there is that entity, the fact that we can't find them easily
Is
kind of speaks
vulnerable.
volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah. Tom.
Yeah, I just don't know if that type of resource material would be something that would be more in their purview than ours. And maybe they have more horsepower than we do, you know, with the number of members that could pull that off. But where I was going to go was, I just wonder if we should, at least on the onset, stay up at 30,000 feet and maybe come up with a short list of bullet point type comments or questions that we could throw at Jeff. So, for example, one I keep coming back to is it possible to create a program in Easthampton where we offer businesses and or developments some sort of tax benefit to cover parking areas with solar? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe Jeff does, or maybe Jeff knows where to get it. Can we do it locally?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do it? And then maybe there's 2 or 3 other questions revolving around where we started this conversation with covering parking lots and how we could encourage businesses or municipalities to go about doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would caution us a little bit to stay up at 30,000 feet just because of the manpower we don't have.
Agree with that. And I do think that we have found consistently strength in coordination with other entities. So I think finding another group that we could collaborate with is a good thing for us in particular.
Agreed.
I like that idea, Tom. I feel like we could do a lot of these things. And these are things like yes and to all of it. So David, I would like to invite Owen to our November meeting. Especially if he's got some recent history with working on this. I trust him to have a sense of how to talk to someone who now feels deeply out of her element and make me feel a little less alienated from how to talk about this. Cassie, I would love to know if we could do some sleuthing to find out if there is an entity or more than one that is trying to work on this educational aggregation thing that we're thinking about. And Tom, I do think that the creation of some bullet points to throw to Jeff is a good idea. So I wrote down your first one. Is it possible to create a program to offer businesses and or developers incentives to cover their parking lots with solar? This is a very specific, this is a specific thing that we're interested in. Can we focus a little on what some of the other questions might be? They might be broader than that.
I think the second part was, how do we do the same for the municipal owned properties as well?
Yeah.
And
okay.
Getting back to that, the contract that Tom was referring to, like what's at play with that contract with the solar up in Deerfield?
Okay. Yep. What's
So like, how do we encourage spot 50 Payson to do that, or hell, the park, any of our park spots.
Yep.
Mill Pond, how can we move those into that realm as well?
Okay. Yep. And I love doing things in threes. Do we have a third question we can throw to Jeff Bagg?
How about the one
about municipal light plant?
How about the one about what the renters might do?
Yeah, that's a good one too. Chris, what do you think?
I was going to say municipal light plant and how we activate it, or who the board members are, if it's a board.
Yep. Okay.
Or at least where we go to get these questions answered.
Right. All right. So that's a good one. And I like, the renters one, we can make that as big or as little as we want it to be. The renting versus owning naturally falls into the category of economic equity and access. And is that the framing we want for that question? Or do we want to be thoughtful about, specifically, how do we think about working with landlords in this city around these very specific green energy, climate friendly policies? Do we have any thoughts about that? Should that be a thing that we should be thinking about? Especially as affordable and fair housing is likely working more on, let's build multifamily housing. Let's make, apartments are going to be a bigger part of our set of residential options in this city as soon as that other building comes online. Every time we're adding new apartments, that's a bigger part of our housing system. We need to be thoughtful about that.
Yes. And if you think about it in terms of equity, charging your car at a charge point station costs twice as much as if you were to simply plug it into your own electric, like home electric. So from an equity standpoint, the simple fact that a renter might not be able to run a charging cord to their car at their home, therefore costs twice as much at that point if they were to go somewhere else to charge their car. So yeah, that's an equity piece, a big equity piece right there.
How much does it cost to charge your car, Dave?
So if it's the charge point, it's $2 per kilowatt hour. but that same cost would be about $1.20 per kilowatt hour from your home electric.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So just back on that point about incentives, I guess the other question would be, is there a way to create some sort of incentive program for landlords to install these? Now, this might be a chicken and an egg thing where the landlord might say, sure, I'll consider it as soon as I have a tenant with an electric car. Or I'll make it known to my tenants that if they're interested in buying an electric car, I can go ahead and install this because I know this incentive is out there.
Yeah, interesting. Great point. Okay, Chris, what are your thoughts?
I think the incentive, we have to remember the incentive has to be big enough to be taken, because if a landlord were to install, say, a $1,500 charge port at home, then they'd be able to write that off against the rental income. So if you were to have the city take $1,500 off your property taxes, that doesn't do anything for a landlord. It's still going to come. In fact, it's less, because you could only deduct half your property taxes if it's like a two-family. Or, the incentive would have to be bigger than the cost of the unit. Just saying. Like significantly bigger, maybe even twice as much to make it even.
Okay, great points. All right, so we have 4 questions we could pose to Jeff, and he may not know the answers, but he may be able to set us down a path to finding them. Cassie, you're cool with doing some research on what entities might be out there creating educational materials, or we might find none?
I can do that. There was something else that was on my plate. Oh, scan for tax incentives. I never completed that. There are a lot of incentives for putting in chargers.
Yeah. I'm definitely interested in whatever examples we can find of municipalities creating these, which may be driven by wanting to align with state plans, and who knows. What's the other thing? David, do you want to write to Owen? Do you want me to?
I'll write to Owen.
Okay.
That's all good.
Okay.
You want to distribute the survey results?
Oh, yeah. Yep. I will share with you the climate action plan survey results that Cassie forwarded to me. All right. That feels like a good set of steps for next time so that we can follow up on this. Are there any other thoughts we have not gotten into about this? Did we cover all the things I put on the agenda? I don't even remember. What's on the agenda? Yeah, no, that's that. Okay. Well, golly, I feel like we could wrap it up. Anybody disagree with that?
Sounds good.
Sounds
That was
good.
hard enough.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today. I appreciate your time and effort. Shall we make a formal motion to close this meeting?
I will motion to close the meeting.
Fantastic. Do I have a
Second.
second? Okay. Tom Brown seconds. All right. All in favor, holler aye. I'll see you in November.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.